The Galactic Council's demand. The voice echoed through the vastness of space, loud and clear. The message, sent from the heart of the galaxy, was unmistakable. The Galactic Council had spoken. A demand was made. Earth, a relatively young and untested species in the eyes of the galaxy, had caught the attention of the most powerful forces in the universe, and the Council wanted something in return for its gaze. Earth, the voice boomed, you will send your tribute to us. We have waited long enough. Your finest will be presented to the Council as a mark of respect. Failure to comply will result in consequences. The humans on Earth were stunned. The very idea that anyone would dare demand anything from them seemed unthinkable. The message came from a fleet of ships so massive that they blocked out entire stars, and their technology was far beyond anything humanity could even dream of. The Galactic Council controlled hundreds of worlds, species, and fleets, and it was clear they had no patience for resistance. News of the message spread like wildfire. Governments and leaders across the planet scrambled to interpret the demand, but no one could agree on what exactly the Council wanted. Some argued it was a request for resources, others believed they wanted something more, perhaps a show of power or something symbolic. In the capital city of the United Nations, world leaders gathered in a tense, dimly lit room. On the large holographic screen before them, the image of the Galactic Council's flagship hovered, ominous and massive. What do they mean by tribute? President Margaret Harris of the United States asked, her voice filled with frustration. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowed as she stared at the shimmering alien vessel. We don't even know what they value. What could we possibly give them? We don't have a choice, said General Klein, a stern military officer who had been brought in for the meeting. If we don't comply, we risk everything. They could destroy us in an instant. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. The question remained, what could they offer? Earth had resources, minerals, technology, even rare elements, but none of these would impress a civilization as advanced as the Galactic Council. I don't care about their demands, said a voice from the back of the room. It was Prime Minister Alejandro Ruiz of Spain. Why should we give in to these aliens? They may have the power, but we cannot let them think they can bully us. Think carefully, Alejandro, President Harris replied, her tone serious. These aren't just any aliens. They control the galaxy. We could be wiped out before we even know what hit us. We need to think this through. We need to offer something they'll accept. The room fell into silence. Everyone had been waiting for an answer, but no one had one. Dr. Carla Nguyen, an expert in alien diplomacy, cleared her throat and stood. What if we gave them something unexpected? She asked, her voice tentative. What if we offered them something they wouldn't expect? Something that might make them see us as a force to be reckoned with. The room fell silent again, all eyes on her. What do you mean? President Harris asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Nguyen hesitated but then spoke. What if we gave them our prisoners? The words hit the room like a bombshell. The shock was immediate. Prisoners? General Klein asked, his brow furrowed. Are you suggesting we give them our criminals? Dr. Nguyen nodded slowly. Yes. We have thousands of prisoners. Those convicted of the worst crimes. Some of them have extraordinary abilities, powers even. We've kept them locked away, but they're still human. What if, instead of sending our wealth or technology, we offered them these criminals as our tribute? The room exploded with voices. Some argued that it was madness. Others saw potential in the idea. But these criminals, they're dangerous, said Prime Minister Ruiz. Some of them are killers. They could be a threat, not just to the Council, but to us. I understand the risk, Dr. Nguyen replied. But consider this. These prisoners are more than just criminals. Some of them have the skills, the knowledge, and the raw power to take on the mightiest of opponents. If the Galactic Council sees them as a worthy tribute, it might give humanity a new kind of leverage. General Klein, ever the military strategist, nodded slowly. If we're going to do this, we need to select the right ones. We can't send just anyone. They need to be dangerous, skilled, and strategic. After hours of heated debate, the leaders of Earth came to an agreement. The prisoners would be sent, but carefully selected, the worst of the worst. The criminals who had proven themselves capable of surviving even the harshest environments. The ones who had something to prove. In a hidden facility deep beneath the surface of Earth, the chosen prisoners were brought together. They were briefed on their mission. They were to be the tribute to the Galactic Council. They were to serve as a symbol of humanity's strength, or perhaps, if they succeeded, as a stepping stone for something more. One by one, the prisoners were transported to the launch sites. Some were defiant, others silent. Some knew they had no choice but to comply, while others saw this as their opportunity for escape. But all of them understood the weight of what they were about to do. As the massive ship carrying the prisoners began its journey toward the Galactic Council's homeworld, the crew was silent, the tension palpable. In a few days, they would reach the alien world, and the fate of humanity would depend on how these prisoners behaved. The message from the Galactic Council had been clear: send your tribute or face destruction. Earth had decided to send its worst. Would it be enough to save them from the wrath of the galaxy's most powerful empire? Or would this bold gamble only make things worse? In Part 1, the Galactic Council demands a tribute from Earth, and the leaders of the planet scramble to find a solution. After much debate, they decide to send a group of the most dangerous criminals in their custody. The story sets the stage for an unpredictable and risky encounter between humanity and the most powerful force in the galaxy. The suspense builds as Earth's leaders place their trust in the hands of those they once feared. A dangerous plan. As the days passed, Earth's leaders quickly moved to put their bold plan into action. The decision had been made, and now it was up to them to see it through. The fate of the planet rested on the shoulders of a group of criminals, men and women who had been locked away for crimes so severe that most considered them beyond redemption. Yet now, these individuals were to be humanity's last hope in a galaxy filled with unimaginable dangers. In a top-secret facility located beneath the surface of a military base, the prisoners were gathered. A cold, sterile room awaited them. Each of the criminals had been carefully selected for their skills, their survival instincts, and their brutal efficiency. These were not just ordinary lawbreakers. They were survivors, fighters, and masterminds who had earned their reputation through violence and cunning. Among them was a man named Victor Hayes, a notorious warlord responsible for countless deaths in the underworld. His strength and charisma had made him a leader in the most dangerous parts of Earth. His icy blue eyes betrayed no emotion as he stood with his arms crossed, staring at the steel door ahead. He had been promised freedom, but he knew it came at a cost, and he wasn't sure whether that cost would be his life. Next to him stood Lila Quinn, a former military officer who had been dishonorably discharged after committing atrocities during a covert operation. She had once been one of the most skilled tacticians on Earth, and her ability to think several steps ahead made her a dangerous ally or enemy. Her hands rested on her hips as she glanced around the room, calculating her next move. Lila had no love for the government that had imprisoned her, but she understood that the only way out of this situation was to play their game. Then there was Dr. Nathaniel Rhodes, a brilliant scientist whose experiments had crossed ethical boundaries. His obsession with genetic manipulation had made him a pariah in scientific communities. His knowledge of alien technology and biology could prove invaluable, but his lack of morals made him unpredictable. The rest of the group was equally dangerous: mercenaries, hackers, thieves, and assassins. Together, they formed a ragtag team that would either save or doom humanity. The prisoners were told little about the mission, but one thing was clear: they were expendable. They were a tool in the hands of Earth's leaders, sent to do their bidding, whether they liked it or not. Victor was the first to break the silence. He had always been the leader, and he knew how to command attention. "So, what's the plan?" His voice was low, commanding with a hint of sarcasm. "We just stroll up to the Galactic Council and hand ourselves over. Leela looked up from the corner where she had been inspecting the room. "I'm sure they'll appreciate the gesture," she said, her voice dripping with irony. "But I wouldn't expect a warm welcome." Dr. Rhodes stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "The humans on Earth have provided us with the necessary tools," he said, his voice cool and detached. "The ship we're traveling on is equipped with enough technology to give us a fighting chance. But we must be careful. The Council is more advanced than we can possibly imagine. We will have to outsmart them if we hope to survive." Victor smirked. "Outsmart them, huh? I like that idea. I've spent my whole life outsmarting people. I can do it again." Leela narrowed her eyes. "Don't get too cocky, Victor. This is unlike anything we faced before. The Galactic Council doesn't play by the same rules." Dr. Rhodes gave a thin smile, the kind that suggested he wasn't concerned. "No, they don't. But that's where we come in. We're not here to follow rules. We're here to break them." The group exchanged glances, each of them contemplating the strange partnership they had formed. They weren't allies by choice, but by necessity. They all had something to prove, and they knew that only by working together would they have any hope of escaping the Galactic Council's grasp. The ship they were boarding was a massive, heavily fortified vessel that had been designed for long voyages. The journey would take several weeks, and in that time, the prisoners would have little to do except prepare for the unknown. There were no luxuries, no comforts. They were shackled, isolated, and under constant surveillance. Yet there was something in the air, something that none of them could ignore: the sense of opportunity. Victor spent the first few days brooding in his cell, trying to make sense of the mission. He had been through worse, he told himself. He had fought wars, run criminal organizations, and survived countless betrayals. This would be no different. But as the days wore on, the nagging feeling grew stronger. This was no ordinary mission. They were about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. Leela, meanwhile, spent her time observing the others. She knew how to read people, how to detect their weaknesses and strengths. She knew that some of these criminals would break under pressure. She also knew that some, like Victor, would thrive. The key was knowing which ones to trust and which ones to watch carefully. Dr. Rhodes had his own agenda. While the others slept, he worked tirelessly in the ship's laboratory, experimenting with the alien technology he had been given. He believed that if they could understand the technology of the Galactic Council, they could turn the tide in their favor. But he also understood the risk. Tampering with unknown technology could have catastrophic consequences. As the ship approached the Galactic Council's homeworld, the prisoners had one final conversation before they entered the unknown. The tension was thick, and the uncertainty of their fate loomed large. Would they be accepted as the tribute they were meant to be? Or would they become pawns in a larger game that they could not understand? The ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of the Council's planet. The prisoners stood in silence, knowing that they were about to face the ultimate test. Their only hope was that their defiance and their skills would be enough to survive. And perhaps, just perhaps, to turn the tables on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. In Part 2, the prisoners are brought together and begin to plan for their journey to the Galactic Council. Each character is introduced with their backstory, motivations, and strengths. The tension between them grows as they realize they must work together to survive, but they all have their own agendas. The stage is set for the dangerous journey ahead, into the heart of the Empire. The journey to the Galactic Council's homeworld was unlike anything the prisoners had ever experienced. Days turned into weeks as the massive vessel hurtled through the vast reaches of space. Time lost meaning in the cold expanse, and the only thing that mattered now was survival. The prisoners were kept in separate cells, monitored at all times, but even in isolation, the tension between them grew. Victor Hayes, ever the leader, found himself restless. He had spent his life controlling others. But here, in this high-tech cage, he was at the mercy of forces far beyond his understanding. The ship's advanced security systems were inescapable, and for the first time in a long while, he felt vulnerable. The cold, sterile walls of his cell did little to soothe his mind. His thoughts kept returning to Earth, the planet that had sent him here, the world he had once ruled from the shadows. Was this truly the end of his story, or was this another game, one where the stakes were higher than anything he had ever known? Layla Quinn, too, was restless, but unlike Victor, she didn't brood. She observed. Her military background had taught her to always be aware of her surroundings, to read the smallest of signs. She watched the guards closely, noting the shifts in their behavior. They were nervous. There was fear in their eyes, something Layla could easily identify. The council's officers were more than just powerful. They were enigmatic. Their authority seemed absolute, but Layla knew that even the most powerful could be brought down if you played the game right. She had always been good at finding cracks in a system. Dr. Nathaniel Rhodes was a different kind of prisoner. While the others focused on their survival, he focused on the science. The alien technology aboard the ship fascinated him. From the moment he had stepped aboard, he had been studying everything. The propulsion systems, the weapons, even the food. It was all so advanced, so far beyond human understanding. If he could figure out how it worked, he could gain unimaginable power. But there was a danger in that. The Galactic Council would not tolerate any attempt to reverse engineer their technology. If they discovered his plans, they would not hesitate to kill him. Meanwhile, the rest of the prisoners kept to themselves. Some were anxious, others resigned. They were all there for different reasons, but they shared one common trait. They were all dangerous. Earth had chosen them for their skills, their ability to survive, and their potential to make an impact. But none of them truly understood the magnitude of the task ahead. The first real challenge came when the ship began its descent into the heart of the Galactic Council's empire. The homeworld of the Council, a planet known only as Elysium, was a world of unimaginable wealth and power. It was a city planet, with structures so tall they pierced the atmosphere, and ships that filled the skies like a never-ending storm. It was a place where the most powerful beings in the galaxy congregated. To enter Elysium was to step into the epicenter of a vast and ancient empire. As the ship broke through the clouds and into the atmosphere, the prisoners felt the weight of what was happening. The ship began to shake violently, and for the first time, they were all forced to pay attention. The ship's engines roared as they prepared for a landing, and the sound was deafening. It was like the entire vessel was under attack. "What the hell is going on?" Victor shouted, slamming his fist against the metal wall of his cell. He was used to being in control, but now, for the first time in a long while, he felt completely out of his depth. Layla was already up, pacing. "They're landing," she said simply. "We're about to meet the Council." Dr. Rhodes, who had been engrossed in a display of alien schematics, looked up, his eyes wide with excitement. "This is it. We've arrived. But we need to be careful. If they discover what we've been doing, what I've been doing, they won't just kill us. They'll make an example of us." The ship shook again, harder this time. Then, with a final jolt, it came to a stop. The silence that followed was deafening. The prisoners could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. They knew they were about to face something far greater than any of them had ever experienced. The doors to their cells opened, and they were escorted out one by one. The guards were tall and imposing, their black uniforms a stark contrast to the bright, almost blinding light of the alien city outside. There were no words exchanged, just cold, silent stares from the guards, and the prisoners obeying out of necessity. The sight before them was beyond anything they had imagined. Elysium was unlike any planet they had ever seen. The city stretched out before them in all its glory. Towering spires of metal and glass reached for the sky, surrounded by a glowing web of lights and energy. Ships of every shape and size hovered in the air, their engines humming with power. The atmosphere was thick with the sense of something ancient, something all-powerful. This was the heart of the Galactic Council. But the prisoners weren't there to admire the view. They were led through the streets, their every step monitored by the eyes of the Empire. The people of Elysium, too, were unlike anything they had ever seen. Humanoid, but with features so alien that they barely resembled any species from Earth. Their eyes were large and glowed with an unsettling light, their skin a variety of unnatural hues. As they were led to a massive building, the centerpiece of the city, the prisoners couldn't help but feel small. Even Victor, with all his bravado, felt a sense of awe. This was not a place where humans belonged. This was a place of unimaginable power. "Stay close," Leela whispered, her voice low and tense. "Don't do anything stupid. These people don't take kindly to mistakes." Victor grinned, showing his teeth. "Mistakes are what I do best." But as they stepped inside the building, they all knew one thing for certain. The real game was about to begin. The Galactic Council had made its demand. Humanity had sent its tribute. But would it be enough to win their favor? Or would it be the spark that ignited a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen? In Part 3, the prisoners arrive on the Galactic Council's homeworld, Elysium. The tension is palpable as they begin to feel the weight of their mission. The unknowns of the Council's true intentions, the grandeur of the alien world, and the sense of being at the mercy of an empire far more powerful than Earth set the stage for the next phase of their journey. The suspense builds as they move deeper into the heart of enemy territory. The trial of humanity. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was nothing short of overwhelming. The prisoners were escorted into a vast, dome-shaped room, its walls lined with alien symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air was thick with an oppressive sense of power, the kind that made even the most hardened criminals feel small. At the center of the room stood a large, circular platform, its surface shimmering with energy. Victor Hayes, Leela Quinn, Dr. Nathaniel Rhodes, and the rest of the prisoners were led to the platform and made to stand in a row, facing the council. As they looked around, they saw beings of all shapes and sizes seated in high curved thrones that seemed to float above the ground. Their eyes were cold, their gazes sharp, and they exuded an air of authority that made the prisoners feel like insects under a magnifying glass. Victor stood tall, his eyes scanning the room. He had faced leaders and warlords before, but this was different. These beings weren't just powerful, they were ancient. Their presence radiated an intelligence that went beyond anything Victor could comprehend. He felt like a predator in a jungle of gods. Leela, on the other hand, remained composed. Her military training had taught her how to hide her emotions, and she used that skill now to keep herself calm. She had faced countless enemies in her life, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't sure how to play this game yet, but she knew one thing for sure. Any mistake would cost them everything. Dr. Rhodes, however, was the most fascinated. His eyes sparkled as he looked around, taking in the alien technology that seemed to hum with an energy all its own. He could sense the vast knowledge contained within the council, the centuries of experience they must have accumulated. But that wasn't what intrigued him the most. No, it was the idea of what they could offer him. Knowledge, power, perhaps even the secrets of life itself. He was a scientist to the core, and this was the greatest discovery of his life. The silence in the room stretched on, the council's members observing the prisoners with cold detachment. Finally, a figure stood, its form shimmering with a translucent quality that made it seem almost otherworldly. It was taller than the others, its face hidden behind a veil of glowing light, giving it an ethereal, almost godlike presence. "Welcome, humanity," the voice boomed, resonating deep within the prisoners' chests. It was a voice that seemed to come from everywhere, yet nowhere at once. The figure's words carried an ancient weight, as though the very fabric of the universe trembled in response. "You have sent us your tribute. We are honored by your gift." Victor couldn't help but scoff inwardly. Tribute? He had expected some form of tribute, but he hadn't thought it would be prisoners, criminals, no less, who would be put forward as an offering. He stood straight, his gaze unflinching. "We do not understand," the voice continued. "You have chosen criminals. Why would you send us those who are already cast aside by your own people? Victor opened his mouth to respond, but Layla quickly silenced him with a sharp look. This was not the time for bravado. She stepped forward, her eyes locking with the floating figure. "We sent you those who know how to survive," she said calmly. "Humans like us are survivors. We don't just give up. We fight." The figure seemed to consider her words for a moment. The silence returned, thick with uncertainty. Then, without warning, another voice, lower and more mechanical, spoke from the shadows. It belonged to one of the other council members, a being with dark, metallic skin and eyes that glowed with a strange, eerie light. "They may be survivors," the voice said, "but what of their loyalty? What of their allegiance to humanity? Are they truly the best representation of your species?" Victor's jaw clenched. This was where it got tricky. They were on trial, and the council was testing them, pushing them to see if they would break. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about proving that humanity deserved to exist, to be part of the galaxy's delicate balance of power. Leela stepped forward again, her voice unwavering. "We are all that remains of humanity's strength. Our loyalty is not to any one government or nation. It's to each other. We fought for our lives in ways you can't understand, and we've earned our place here." The council members murmured among themselves, their voices echoing in the chamber. The tension was palpable, like a knife hanging by a thread, ready to drop. Dr. Rhodes remained quiet, but his mind was racing. He knew what was at stake. One wrong move, one wrong word, and they would be gone, erased from existence like so many other civilizations that had dared to challenge the council before them. Finally, the towering figure spoke again. "We have heard your words, human," it said. "But words alone will not prove your worth. We will see if you are truly fit to exist among us." The platform beneath the prisoners hummed, and they were lifted into the air. The room spun as they were taken to another chamber, this one dimly lit and cold. The air was thick with a strange energy, and the prisoners could feel the weight of their surroundings pressing down on them. "This is the trial of humanity," the figure's voice echoed in the chamber. "You will face challenges designed to test your will, your intellect, and your strength. Should you fail, humanity will be eradicated. Should you succeed, you will be allowed to leave this place with your lives." Victor's mind raced as he looked around. He wasn't afraid of the challenges. He had faced worse, but the stakes were higher now than they had ever been. This was no longer about survival. It was about proving that humanity was more than just a footnote in the galaxy. It was about showing the Council that they had underestimated the power of Earth's people. "Are you ready?" the voice asked, and with that, the trial began. In Part 4, the prisoners faced the Galactic Council in the trial of humanity, where their worth and loyalty are tested. The suspense builds as they must prove themselves in ways that go beyond simple survival. The trial becomes a turning point where their future, and the future of humanity, hangs in the balance. The test of strength. The chamber hummed with an unnatural energy, a quiet but powerful vibration that seemed to reverberate through the prisoners' very bones. Victor, Leela, Dr. Rhodes, and the others stood on the platform, their eyes scanning the room. The walls were made of a smooth alien material that shimmered with an eerie light. The air itself seemed charged with anticipation. They were no longer in control of their fate. The Council had set its test, and it was now up to them to face it head-on. A door at the far end of the room opened with a soft hiss. From within, a figure stepped forward, tall, armored, and cloaked in shadows. The figure's features were hidden beneath a helmet, and its presence sent a shiver down their spines. The creature moved forward with deliberate steps, each one echoing loudly in the stillness. "This is the first test." The voice of the towering figure from earlier spoke again, resonating through the chamber. "You will face the champion of the Galactic Council. Defeat him, and you will prove humanity's strength. Fail, and you will be eliminated." Victor's heart raced. He had fought in wars before, taken down enemies with his bare hands, and outwitted the most dangerous of opponents. But this was different. The being before him was not human, and he had no idea what kind of power it wielded. The armored figure stopped in the center of the room, its stance one of perfect confidence. It seemed to be waiting, judging them, its body language unnervingly calm. Victor knew that the first challenge would be a test of strength, something that would push him to his limits. He cracked his knuckles, trying to steady his nerves. Leela stood next to him, her face grim. "This is it," she muttered, her eyes fixed on the champion. "We have to win this, no matter what." Victor nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The pressure was immense, but he had never backed down from a challenge. This time would be no different. The champion's voice came, deep and mechanical, echoing throughout the chamber. "You may attack me as you wish, but know this, I will not show mercy." Victor smirked. "We don't need your mercy," he muttered under his breath, readying himself for what was to come. With a sudden, swift motion, the armored figure lunged forward, its hand extending toward Victor. The speed was almost too fast to comprehend, but Victor had faced threats like this before. He sidestepped just in time, narrowly avoiding the attack. The champion's strike slammed into the ground with a deafening crash, sending a shockwave through the room. Victor quickly countered, his fist flying toward the creature's side. But the figure was fast. It twisted and blocked the blow with ease, its armored body absorbing the impact. A metallic clang rang out as Victor pulled back, realizing that brute force alone wouldn't win this fight. The champion was stronger, faster, and more durable than any human he had ever fought. Leela's voice echoed in his mind. "Think, Victor. This is not just about strength. It's about strategy." Victor's mind raced. He couldn't rely on his raw power. He had to be smarter. Using his agility, he ducked beneath another strike, this one aimed at his head, and quickly moved behind the champion. With a powerful shove, he tried to push the creature off balance. But the champion's reflexes were lightning fast. It twisted and grabbed Victor's arm, slamming him to the ground with a bone-rattling thud. Victor gritted his teeth, trying to push himself up. His chest burned with the force of the impact, but he refused to stay down. This was a fight for survival. It was about proving humanity's worth. Dr. Rhodes watched from the sidelines, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "This is incredible," he whispered, studying the combat. The technology behind the champion's armor and speed was far beyond anything Earth could produce. It was almost like the being was a living weapon, designed for combat, and nothing else. Leela, ever the strategist, was already analyzing the situation. She knew that brute force alone wouldn't win this battle. She had to think of a way to outsmart their opponent, to find its weakness. There had to be a flaw, a blind spot that they could exploit. Her eyes darted over the champion's form, watching closely for any sign of weakness. The creature's movements were precise, its strikes powerful and calculated. But Leela noticed something. The champion's armor, though advanced, had joints, small areas where its movements weren't as fluid. If she could get close enough, she might be able to exploit one of those gaps. With a quick glance at Victor, she silently nodded. It was time to make a move. As Victor launched another series of attacks, distracting the champion with feints and quick jabs, Leela moved. She darted forward, her movements swift and silent. With one fluid motion, she reached the champion's side and struck hard at the weak point behind its knee joint. The hit landed with a satisfying crack, and the champion staggered, its balance momentarily thrown off. Victor seized the opportunity. He launched himself forward, using the momentum from Leela's strike to his advantage. With a powerful blow, he hit the champion in the chest, knocking it back. The creature faltered, its footing unstable for just a moment. That moment was all Victor needed. With a roar, he slammed his fist into the champion's torso, and this time, the creature didn't recover. The blow sent it crashing to the floor, its armor clattering against the ground. The room fell into a stunned silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. The prisoners stood in stunned disbelief. Had they really won? The silence was broken by the sound of the alien voice once more. Impressive, it said, the tone neutral but acknowledging. You have passed the first test. But know this, the trials are far from over. Victor, panting heavily, looked around at his fellow prisoners. He saw the same disbelief in their eyes, but he also saw something else, a spark of hope. They had won the first challenge, but the real test had just begun. In Part 5, the prisoners faced the Galactic Council's champion in a brutal test of strength. They must use their wits, their agility, and their teamwork to survive the challenge and prove that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. The suspense continues to build as they move closer to their ultimate goal, but the dangers they face are only escalating. The victory is hard-earned, but it sets the stage for even greater trials ahead. The trial of intellect. The heavy silence that followed their victory in the first test weighed down on the prisoners as they stood in the chamber, watching the defeated champion slowly rise to its feet. The alien's movements were stiff and mechanical, its armor battered from the intense battle. For a brief moment, it regarded the prisoners with an unreadable expression, then nodded slowly, acknowledging their success. You have passed the trial of strength, the voice of the council echoed once again, reverberating in the chamber. But now you must face the trial of intellect. Victor wiped the sweat from his brow, breathing heavily after the fierce fight. He had no time to rest. The pressure was mounting, and there was no turning back now. They had shown their strength, but this next trial would test their minds, their ability to think, adapt, and solve problems under immense pressure. A panel on the floor of the chamber slid open, revealing a large holographic display that flickered to life. The room dimmed, and a new voice, this one cold and mechanical, filled the air. The trial of intellect is simple. Solve the puzzles we present to you, and you will succeed. Fail, and your existence will be erased. Choose wisely, humans. Victor's eyes narrowed. Puzzles. He had solved many problems in his life. Strategic ones, tactical ones, even scientific ones. But this was different. They weren't just facing any ordinary puzzles. These were challenges designed by beings with knowledge and intelligence far beyond humanity's understanding. Still, he was determined. He had no intention of letting humanity be wiped out by something as simple as a test of intellect. Leela stepped forward, her military instincts kicking in. Let's take it one step at a time. We'll work together. We've overcome worse, haven't we? She looked at the others, her eyes steady. Victor nodded. We'll figure this out. Whatever it is, we've got this. The holographic display in front of them flickered again and revealed a complex web of symbols, each one interlocking with another. Some symbols glowed brightly, while others were faded, as if hidden. The shapes seemed to move and shift constantly, making it impossible to focus on just one at a time. This is a puzzle of interconnected pathways, Dr. Rhodes muttered, eyes scanning the display. Each symbol must be connected to another, forming a specific sequence. If we choose the wrong path, the entire web will collapse. We must find the right connections. Leela quickly assessed the situation. We need a starting point. We can't just guess. Victor was already studying the display. He squinted, trying to focus on the glowing symbols. They seemed to pulse with energy, as if they were alive. He could feel the weight of the challenge settling in. This wasn't just a game. This was life and death. This one, Victor said, pointing to a glowing symbol on the left side of the display. It seems to have the most energy. Let's start with this. Leela and Dr. Rhodes nodded, agreeing. Together, they began to follow the glowing symbol, tracing the path of its energy. As they moved through the puzzle, other symbols began to light up, connecting themselves in a sequence. It was like a web of energy coming to life. The final trial. The room was silent. The hum of the chamber had faded into nothingness as the mechanical voice echoed one last time, its tone almost foreboding. Now you stand at the threshold of the final trial. Only those who pass will be granted the title of true warriors. Fail, and your existence will be erased, not only from this galaxy, but from the memories of every race that has ever known you. Victor, Leela, Dr. Rhodes, and the others stood together, exhaustion lining their faces. They had come so far. They had endured the trial of strength and the trial of intellect, proving themselves worthy in ways that few others could imagine. Yet despite their victories, the shadow of doubt still lingered. This last trial would be unlike any of the others. Victor's knuckles cracked as he clenched his fists. He had felt fear before, in battle, in the face of certain death. But here, in this strange place, with the fate of humanity on the line, the fear was palpable. He had no idea what to expect. What kind of test could the Galactic Council possibly have left? The air in the chamber shifted. A new presence filled the room, a presence so powerful that it seemed to press against their very minds. The walls around them trembled and the lights dimmed, casting eerie shadows over the group. Then a figure appeared, not an alien champion like before, but something far more unsettling. It was an enormous being, towering over them by several meters. Its body was made of a strange, shimmering material that seemed to bend light around it, giving it an almost ethereal, otherworldly presence. It was humanoid in shape, but its eyes, two vast, glowing orbs, were filled with an intelligence that seemed to reach into their very souls. This being did not speak with words. Instead, it communicated through thoughts, sending a flood of images, emotions, and sensations directly into their minds. Your final trial is one of choice. The being's voice rang in their minds. You must decide what it means to be human. What drives you? What are you willing to sacrifice for the survival of your species? Choose wisely, for your decision will shape the fate of Earth and all who call it home. The room went still as they absorbed the message. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Each of them could feel the weight of the decision they were being asked to make. The choices they would face were not just about survival. They were about what humanity stood for. Leela, ever the strategist, spoke first, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in the air. We've faced trials before. We've fought, and we've survived. But now, we have to choose. What are we willing to risk to ensure humanity's survival? Victor glanced at her, his jaw set. He knew what she meant. This trial wasn't just about them. It was about the future of humanity. Every decision they made from here on out would shape their legacy in the universe. A new image flooded their minds. It was a vision of Earth, burning, crumbling, as alien ships descended from the sky, bringing with them chaos and destruction. The voice of the being continued to echo in their minds, its tone colder now. Do you choose to fight for survival at all costs, no matter the cost to your morals? Or do you choose to protect what is human in the face of destruction, even if it means sacrificing your own lives? Victor's heart raced. This wasn't just a question of strategy. It was a moral dilemma. Should they give everything for survival? Or should they protect the values they had fought so hard to preserve, even if it meant their destruction? The images in their minds shifted again, showing them visions of their loved ones, of cities destroyed, of families torn apart. But then, something else emerged, a vision of unity. The human race, standing together, strong and resolute. The will to fight, to protect, to survive, no matter the odds. Victor felt a surge of determination rise within him. We'd fight for humanity, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. We fight for our future, for the future of everyone who has ever called Earth home. We don't sacrifice what makes us human. We fight with honor. We fight together. Leela stepped forward, her expression resolute. Victor's right. We can't let fear control us. We choose humanity with all its flaws and strengths. We choose to fight, to protect, and to honor the very thing that makes us who we are. Dr. Rhodes, still reeling from the mental images, nodded slowly. We've always been more than just survival. We've created art, we've built civilizations, and we found meaning in the face of destruction. We choose that. The figure before them remained silent, its glowing eyes watching them carefully. It seemed to study them, weighing their words and actions. Finally, it spoke again, but this time, the voice was filled with respect. Your choice is clear. You have chosen the path of humanity, the path of sacrifice, honor, and unity. You have passed the final trial. The chamber around them began to shimmer, and the strange being slowly dissolved into light, leaving the prisoners standing together in the now still room. They had passed the test, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had chosen what it meant to be human. The mechanical voice of the council returned, this time with a tone of finality. You have proven yourselves worthy. Humanity's future is yours to shape. But know this, you are not alone in the universe. There are those who will challenge you, those who will test your resolve. But you have earned the right to defend your world. The lights in the chamber brightened, and the walls seemed to shift, revealing an exit. The prisoners were free. They had survived the trials, proven their worth, and secured a future for humanity. Victor stood at the front of the group, his eyes filled with determination. They had made it, but he knew that this was only the beginning. There were many more battles ahead, and humanity's true test had only just begun. As they walked through the exit, ready to face whatever came next, they were not just survivors, they were warriors. In Part 7, the prisoners faced their final challenge, a moral and philosophical trial that tests what it means to be human. The choice they make defines their future, showing that true strength lies not only in power or intelligence, but in the values that guide them. With their decision, humanity's fate is secured, but the journey is far from over. The future of Earth is now in their hands, and the trials ahead will be even more challenging than the ones they've already faced.